The biggest soldier laughed when the governess warned him to release the Duke's sister. He stopped laughing when Eleanor shattered a skillet against his head and sent him sprawling at the feet of 5 armed men. The blow rang through the breakfast room like a chapel bell. Lady Beatrice clung to Eleanor's torn dress, one hand pressed over the livid marks rising on her wrist. 12-year-old Anne crouched behind them beneath the edge of the table, trying desperately not to sob. Broken china littered the carpet. Brandy ran between the silver dishes, and the fallen soldier's blood darkened the white linen beneath his cheek. Eleanor tightened both hands around the skillet's bent handle. "Take your men and leave Ravenshire House." Captain Mowbray slowly drew his sword. A governess giving orders to His Majesty's cavalry? A woman warning 6 drunken cowards. His smile disappeared. The remaining soldiers moved apart, surrounding her. Eleanor knew she could not defeat 5 armed men with a damaged cooking pan. She needed only to keep their attention until Beatrice could reach the bell pull. Without looking away from the captain, Eleanor shifted 1 step to her left. Beatrice understood. She stretched toward the embroidered cord. The doors flew open before her fingers reached it. What in God's name has happened here? The Duke of Ravenshire stood on the threshold in a dark riding coat, rain gleaming across his shoulders. His gaze passed over the shattered dishes, the unconscious soldier, and his terrified sisters, before settling upon Eleanor. For one breath, alarm broke through his habitual coldness. "Beatrice, Anne." Anne scrambled from beneath the table and ran to him. "They tried to take us." Ravenshire caught her against his chest. Beatrice remained behind Eleanor. Captain Mowbray sheathed his sword with remarkable composure. "Your Grace, we entered under lawful authority. That woman attacked Private Gresham without provocation." "Without provocation?" Beatrice cried. "He put his hands on me." The captain glanced toward the open doorway. Lord Harcourt entered, as if he had been waiting for his cue. Silver-haired and impeccably dressed, he showed no surprise at the chaos. His daughter, Lady Cecily, the woman Ravenshire intended to marry once Eleanor had been erased from his life, remained discreetly in the corridor. Harcourt held out a folded document. "These men carry orders permitting them to inspect the eastern wing and quarter here until the northern disturbances are contained. The document bears your seal, Ravenshire." Eleanor felt the room change. Only 3 months had passed since Ravenshire publicly denied the marriage they had entered before a military chaplain in Portugal. He had called the record defective and Eleanor an opportunist, then allowed her to remain merely because his sisters refused to accept another governess. Harcourt had gained influence over the estate from the moment Ravenshire chose ambition over truth. Now armed men stood inside the family residence carrying his authority. Captain Mowbray pointed at the unconscious soldier. Private Gresham attempted to direct Lady Beatrice away from broken glass. Mrs. Vale struck him from behind. "That is a lie," Eleanor said. Ravenshire's eyes moved to Beatrice's bruised wrist. He saw it. Eleanor knew he saw it. "Ask your sisters what happened," she said. "Not Lord Harcourt, not the captain. Ask the girls." Harcourt lowered his voice. "Choose carefully. An accusation against royal soldiers could cost you the military appointment we have spent months securing." There it was, the price of truth stated aloud. Ravenshire looked from the official orders to Eleanor. She remembered the man who had once crossed a field under cannon fire because he believed she was trapped in a burning hospital tent. That man had promised he would never allow rank or fear to make a coward of him. The Duke, standing before her, unfolded the document, but did not read beyond the signature. "Constable," he called. A uniformed man stepped into the room. Eleanor's last fragile hope collapsed. "Take Mrs. Vale into custody," Ravenshire ordered. Beatrice placed herself in front of Eleanor. "You cannot mean it. I will question everyone when order has been restored." "You mean when Lord Harcourt has given you the answers he wants," Eleanor said. A muscle tightened in Ravenshire's jaw. He could have examined the bruises. He could have questioned the servants or inspected the orders. Instead, he chose the alliance he wanted and the lie that made it possible. "Remove her," the constable approached reluctantly. Eleanor surrendered the skillet and held out her hands. She would not give Harcourt the satisfaction of watching her struggle. Iron closed around her wrists. Lady Anne began to cry. "Please do not send her away." Eleanor forced herself to smile. "Stay beside Beatrice. Lock your bedchamber tonight and open the door for no one." Captain Mowbray's expression sharpened. As the constable led Eleanor past the fallen soldier, Private Gresham's eyes suddenly opened. His lips barely moved. "Wrong, sister." Eleanor stopped. The constable pulled her onward, but something inside Gresham's coat caught upon a broken chair. A silver chain slipped free, followed by a miniature portrait. It was not Beatrice's face painted beneath the glass. It was Eleanor's. Someone had drawn a red cross over her throat. She looked toward Lord Harcourt. For the first time, the older man's composure cracked. His eyes dropped to the portrait, then lifted sharply toward Captain Mowbray. The soldiers had not come merely to seize the Duke's sisters. They had come to find Eleanor, and Ravenshire had just placed her in their hands. The constable's grip tightened as Eleanor twisted toward the miniature lying among the broken porcelain. "Wait. Pick that up. I have my orders, madam. That portrait proves these men knew who I was before entering this house." Captain Mowbray stepped forward and brought his boot down upon the miniature. Glass cracked beneath his heel. "It proves only that Private Gresham carries cheap pictures of women. Then why destroy it?" No one answered. Lord Harcourt recovered first. "Constable, remove her before this performance becomes more embarrassing." Beatrice darted past him and snatched the silver chain from beneath Mowbray's boot. The portrait's glass had splintered, but the painted face and red mark remained visible. "I will keep it," she said. Mowbray reached for her. Ravenshire caught his wrist before he could touch her. "You will not lay a hand on my sister." For one brief instant, Eleanor saw the Duke he had once been. Then Harcourt murmured something beside him, and Ravenshire released the captain without demanding an explanation. Eleanor was led through the servants' corridor and out into the rear courtyard. Rain struck her face as the constable hurried her toward a waiting carriage. Its door bore no official crest. She stopped so suddenly that he nearly collided with her. "That is not the magistrate's carriage. I was told it had been sent for you." "By whom?" The man looked toward the house. 2 of Mowbray's soldiers had followed them outside. Eleanor lowered her voice. "If you place me inside, I shall never reach the magistrate." Unease flickered across his face, but fear overpowered it. "I cannot disobey his grace. The Duke ordered you to take me into custody. He did not order you to surrender me to Captain Mowbray." One soldier opened the carriage door. The interior curtains were drawn, and the handle on the inside had been removed. The constable saw it. His hand moved instinctively toward the keys at his belt. Before he could unlock Eleanor's irons, the second soldier struck him behind the ear. He fell into the mud without a sound. Eleanor drove her shoulder into the first man and ran. Her skirt caught around her ankles. But years spent following the Duke's sisters across fields and ruined garden walls had made her quicker than the soldiers expected. She reached the kitchen passage before a hand closed around the back of her dress. The fabric tore. Eleanor stumbled through the doorway, seized a bowl from the preparation table, and flung flour into her pursuer's face. He cursed and crashed against a cupboard. She kicked the door shut, dropped the iron bar into place, and ran toward the schoolroom. She had perhaps 1 minute. During the 3 years Eleanor had supervised Beatrice and Anne's education, the schoolroom had become the only space at Ravenshire that still belonged to her. The shelves held Latin exercises and geography books, but the locked cabinet beneath the maps contained something more valuable: household records Eleanor had quietly maintained when Ravenshire's steward began neglecting them. Before her marriage, Eleanor's widowed mother had managed a small posting inn. By 16, Eleanor could calculate provisions, detect altered bills, and remember which supplier delivered each barrel without consulting a ledger. At Ravenshire, those skills had saved the household hundreds of pounds and prevented 2 winters of food shortages. Ravenshire had accepted every success while refusing to acknowledge who produced it. She dropped to her knees before the cabinet. The chain between her wrists made the key difficult to turn, but the lock finally opened. Inside were copies of wine orders, guest lists, servant rotations, and the Eastern Wing's supply accounts. Eleanor searched until she found the page recording military deliveries. 6 barrels of brandy had arrived that week. The official order listed only 2. 4 barrels had been carried to the sealed northern storehouse, the same place Ravenshire had forbidden everyone to enter after Harcourt claimed it contained confidential military supplies. Footsteps thundered along the passage. Eleanor tore out the page and concealed it inside the lining of her sleeve. She was closing the cabinet when the schoolroom door opened. Ravenshire entered alone. His attention went immediately to the torn dress, the flour across her shoulder, and the blood where the irons had cut her wrists. "What happened?" The men you trusted tried to force me into an unmarked carriage. His face hardened. Mowbray said you attacked the constable and escaped. The constable is unconscious in the courtyard. Look inside the carriage before it disappears. Ravenshire crossed to the window. Below them, horses were already pulling the vehicle toward the western gate. He reached for the bell. Eleanor stepped between him and the cord. First, remove these irons. I cannot release a prisoner based only upon her own account. You accepted Mowbray's account without hesitation. That was different. Because he is a man, because he wears a uniform, or because Lord Harcourt needs you to believe him. Shame flashed across his face, quickly replaced by anger. You struck a soldier. He was dragging Beatrice away. Ravenshire looked toward the corridor, but Eleanor recognized the old hesitation. He was measuring truth against ambition again. She placed her chained hands on the table. You once trusted me with your life. Now you will not trust me long enough to ask your own sister a question. His gaze fell to the thin scar crossing her palm, the scar she had received pulling him from the hospital fire in Portugal. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ravenshire took the key from the desk and unlocked the irons. This does not mean I believe you. No, Eleanor said, rubbing blood back into her hands. It means some part of you understands that I may be the only person in this house who has not lied to you. A scream rose from the floor below. They ran from the schoolroom and found Anne at the top of the great staircase. She was white-faced and alone. Beatrice is gone, she gasped. Captain Mowbray said, you ordered him to take her to the eastern wing. Ravenshire's expression emptied. I gave no such order. Eleanor pulled the hidden supply page from her sleeve. Beside the 4 unrecorded barrels was a delivery time written in Harcourt's own hand. Midnight. They had less than an hour to discover what was inside the northern storehouse and why Beatrice had been taken there. Ravenshire snatched the supply page from Eleanor's hand and read the entry twice. This is not Harcourt's handwriting. You have received letters from him for 6 months. Look at the capital M. He closes it like a gate, then cuts the final stroke beneath the next word. The Duke's eyes followed the ink. Doubt appeared, but Eleanor had seen him turn doubt into denial too many times. She took back the page. Believe whatever protects your ambition. I am going after Beatrice. You are not going anywhere alone. Then try to keep pace. Eleanor gathered her torn skirt and hurried down the servants' staircase, with Ravenshire and Anne behind her. They found the constable conscious in the courtyard, leaning against the rain barrel, while a kitchen maid pressed a cloth to his head. He confirmed Eleanor's account at once. 2 soldiers had struck him and attempted to force her into the unmarked carriage. Ravenshire's face hardened. Why was I told you attacked him? Because Mowbray needed me outside the house before you asked that question. Eleanor crouched beside the constable. Did you see where they took Lady Beatrice? Across the old orchard, ma'am. Toward the northern wall. Ravenshire ordered Anne to remain with the servants and summoned 4 footmen. But Eleanor stopped him before he could ring the main alarm bell. If Harcourt controls the men stationed at the gates, an alarm will warn him. He is my future father-in-law, not an invading general. Then explain why his soldiers carried my portrait and tried to abduct me. Ravenshire had no answer. They crossed the wet orchard with 2 trusted footmen carrying lanterns behind them. The northern storehouse stood beyond a crumbling stone wall, its windows boarded and its doors secured by a new brass lock. No soldiers guarded it. That frightened Eleanor more than an armed patrol would have done. She moved around the building, examining the mud. 3 sets of boot prints led toward the western entrance, accompanied by the narrow tracks of a cart. A 4th trail was lighter and uneven. Beatrice, Eleanor said. She drags her left heel when she is frightened. Ravenshire stared at the marks as if he had never noticed the habit. Eleanor had noticed it when Beatrice was 13, after the girl had fallen from a horse and begun hiding pain rather than disappoint her brother. At the western entrance, she found a hairpin lying in the mud. It belonged to Beatrice. She left this deliberately. Eleanor inserted the pin into the lock. Ravenshire caught her wrist. If military property is stored inside, breaking that seal could be called treason. Your sister is behind that door. And if Harcourt is testing whether I can protect confidential material. Eleanor turned on him. A drunken soldier bruised Beatrice. Another tried to abduct me, and she has now vanished. If you still believe this is a test of your obedience, then Harcourt chose you perfectly. Ravenshire released her wrist. Open it. The lock yielded after several attempts. The footmen pulled the doors apart, and the smell struck them first, not brandy, but salt, lamp oil, and something sharply metallic. Inside, crates had been stacked from floor to rafters. Military coats lay over the nearest row, concealing labels burned into the wood. Eleanor wiped away the oil and read the name of a London shipping company that had ceased trading 2 years earlier. These are not army supplies. Ravenshire lifted a crowbar and forced open the nearest crate. Beneath a layer of straw lay dozens of French-made pistols. The next crate contained powder horns. The supposed brandy barrels held gunpowder packed beneath shallow compartments of cheap liquor. One lantern spark could have destroyed half the northern grounds. "Smuggled weapons," Ravenshire said, "stored under my seal." From behind the crates came the scrape of a shoe. Eleanor seized the lantern and followed the sound. Beatrice sat on the floor with her wrists tied. A cloth knotted across her mouth. Eleanor freed her, while Ravenshire searched the shadows. "Mowbray brought me here," Beatrice whispered. "He said he needed the portrait back. When I refused, he asked where Eleanor kept the household accounts." Ravenshire went still. "Why would he care about her accounts?" "Because I recorded every delivery before Harcourt replaced the steward," Eleanor said. "If those records are compared against his orders, they will show when the weapons entered your estate." A slow clap came from the loft above them. Captain Mowbray leaned against the railing, sword in one hand and a pistol in the other. 3 soldiers appeared behind the upper crates. "Very impressive, Mrs. Vale. Lord Harcourt said you would reach the truth if Ravenshire failed to remove you quickly enough." The Duke stepped in front of Eleanor and Beatrice. "Put down the weapon. You entered my land under forged orders and assaulted my sisters." "Forged?" Mowbray laughed. "Every order bears your genuine seal. You gave Lord Harcourt unrestricted authority over the northern properties when you signed the marriage alliance agreement." Ravenshire's confidence faltered. Harcourt had placed several documents before him after announcing the engagement. Eleanor remembered warning Ravenshire never to sign pages he had not read. He had accused her of jealousy and dismissed her from the study. Mowbray raised the pistol. "The weapons will be discovered tomorrow by a royal inspector. Ravenshire will be charged with supplying radicals. Lord Harcourt will gain control of the estate through his daughter's marriage, and the inconvenient governess will be blamed for keeping the false accounts." "Why send men after my sisters?" Ravenshire demanded. "We came for Eleanor." "Your sisters simply interfered." Beatrice drew a sharp breath. The drunken attack had not been part of Harcourt's careful plan. It had been the soldiers' cruelty. Yet Ravenshire's refusal to believe the women had allowed the plan to continue. Eleanor glanced at the oil spreading from a cracked barrel beneath the loft. The soldiers stood directly above it. Beside her foot lay a loose iron hoop from one of the casks. She bent as though comforting Beatrice, closed her fingers around the hoop and whispered, "When I move, take the lantern and run." Eleanor hurled the iron ring at the loft supports. It struck the weakened timber, shaking the railing. Mowbray fired. Ravenshire dragged Eleanor down as the ball tore through his coat and buried itself in a crate. The footmen charged. Beatrice seized the lantern, and one of the soldiers kicked over an open powder horn during the struggle. Black grains scattered across the floor toward the burning wick. "Do not move!" Eleanor shouted. Everyone froze, except Mowbray. He dropped from the loft, struck Ravenshire with the pistol, and seized Beatrice around the throat. "Give me the supply page," he ordered, "or the Duke's sister dies before this building burns." Ravenshire lay dazed among the crates. Eleanor faced the captain with the ledger page in one hand, and only seconds to decide whether surrendering it would save Beatrice or destroy the sole record capable of proving who had filled Ravenshire's estate with weapons. Eleanor held the supply page above the lantern flame. "Release her first." Mowbray tightened his arm around Beatrice's throat. "You are in no position to bargain. Neither are you. If you kill her, Ravenshire will spend every remaining acre and every political favour hunting you. If you burn this building while standing inside it, Harcourt will call you a drunken criminal and deny ever knowing your name." The captain's eyes flickered. Eleanor had found the weakness beneath his swagger. Mowbray believed himself Harcourt's partner, but he was merely the man chosen to carry the blame. "You are lying. Then tell me what Harcourt promised you." She lowered the corner of the page toward the flame. "Command of a regiment? A share of the smuggling profits? Perhaps Ravenshire's position after his arrest? Give me the page. He promised you something he never intended to deliver." Mowbray's jaw tightened, confirming it. Behind him, Beatrice opened and closed one hand. It was the silent signal Eleanor had taught both sisters during riding lessons. Ready. Eleanor released the page. Mowbray instinctively lunged to catch it before it reached the lantern. Beatrice drove her heel into his shin and threw herself sideways. Ravenshire surged from the floor, striking the captain across the jaw. The pistol skidded beneath a crate. One footman seized Beatrice and pulled her toward the doors, while the other wrestled Mowbray against a barrel. Eleanor caught the falling paper inches above the flame, but the movement knocked the lantern from Beatrice's hand. Its glass shattered. Oil spread across the boards, carrying fire toward the scattered gunpowder. "Outside!" Eleanor shouted. Ravenshire dragged the nearest barrel away from the flames, while the footman hauled Mowbray through the doorway. Eleanor seized a heavy wool military coat and smothered the burning trail. Fire bit through the fabric and scorched her palms, but she pressed harder until the last orange tongue disappeared beneath the cloth. Smoke filled the storehouse. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Ravenshire lifted the ruined coat and crushed a glowing edge beneath his boot. "You could have been killed." Eleanor stared at him through the smoke. "So could your sisters, while you were deciding whether their bruises mattered more than your appointment." The words struck more deeply than Mowbray's pistol. Ravenshire looked toward Beatrice, who stood outside shaking beneath a footman's coat. He crossed to her, but she stepped away from him and went to Eleanor instead. That small refusal emptied his face. Mowbray began laughing from the ground. Blood ran from his split lip. "You think finding these weapons saves you? Harcourt has every document he needs. The Duke signed them himself." Ravenshire seized the captain by the collar. "What did I sign?" "Your ruin. Where are the original orders? Ask your intended bride." Hoofbeats sounded beyond the orchard. A dozen mounted soldiers appeared along the northern wall, followed by a black carriage bearing Lord Harcourt's crest. Ravenshire's own household guards rode with them. Harcourt stepped down before the carriage had fully stopped. Lady Cecily followed, pale and composed beneath a crimson travelling cloak. "Thank heaven we reached you," Harcourt called. "Captain Mowbray's men warned me that Mrs. Vale had taken Lady Beatrice hostage and forced entry into the military storehouse." Beatrice stared at him. "That is not what happened. You are frightened and confused, my dear." Harcourt turned to the guards. "Secure Mrs. Vale before she reaches the gunpowder." No one moved immediately. Ravenshire stood between Eleanor and the approaching men. "These crates contain smuggled French weapons." "Precisely," Harcourt said. "Weapons discovered on your land, beneath your seal, beside false supply records maintained by your former mistress." Former mistress. He used the phrase deliberately, erasing Eleanor's marriage while staining her reputation in front of every witness. Lady Cecily drew a leather ledger from beneath her cloak. "We found this in Mrs. Vale's cabinet." Eleanor recognized the cover, but not its contents. Her genuine household ledger was brown, worn smooth at the corners, and repaired with blue thread. The book in Cecily's hands was black and newly bound. "That is not mine." Cecily opened it to a marked page. "It records payments from a French shipping agent to Eleanor Vale. The amounts correspond to the weapons stored here." Ravenshire took the ledger. The entries appeared to be in Eleanor's handwriting. Her name stood beneath each payment. Anyone unfamiliar with her accounts might have believed them genuine, but the numbers were written in a careful, formal hand, rather than the compressed figures she used when calculating supplies. Harcourt had copied her letters, not her ledgers. "Where did you find this?" Ravenshire asked. "In the locked cabinet beneath the schoolroom maps," Cecily answered. Eleanor saw the mistake immediately. She had left that cabinet open when Ravenshire found her. Cecily could not truthfully claim to have discovered a locked book inside it. Ravenshire had witnessed the cabinet standing open, but whether he would recognize the contradiction before Harcourt controlled the conversation remained uncertain. Eleanor stepped toward the ledger. Two guards lowered their muskets. "Examine the binding," she said. "The pages are new. The ink has not aged." And ask Lady Cecily how she unlocked a cabinet that was already open. Cecily's fingers tightened around her cloak. Harcourt answered for her. "The desperate inventions of an exposed traitor. Then let the Duke compare this writing with the estate bills I prepared last winter. Those records were destroyed this morning," Harcourt said. The triumph in his voice lasted only a fraction of a second, but Eleanor heard it. He had revealed knowledge no innocent man should possess. She turned to Ravenshire. How did Lord Harcourt know the records were destroyed unless he ordered their destruction? Silence spread across the yard. Ravenshire looked from Harcourt to the false ledger. He had finally been given the clear opportunity Eleanor had demanded, the chance to stop, investigate, and choose truth. Harcourt moved beside him and spoke quietly. The royal inspector arrives at dawn. If you defend her now, you tie your name to treason. Give me authority over the estate guards, and I can contain this scandal before London hears of it. Eleanor watched Ravenshire's face close. He wanted the appointment, the alliance, and the easy explanation that placed every crime upon the woman he had already sacrificed once. Do not sign anything else, she warned. Harcourt produced a prepared order and held out a pen. Ravenshire hesitated, looking at Beatrice's bruises, the weapons, and the fresh ledger in his hands. Then he placed the paper against the carriage door and signed, "Until the investigation is complete, Lord Harcourt will command the household guards." Harcourt's smile was almost imperceptible. At once, the guards surrounded Eleanor and the Duke's sisters. The choice had not protected Ravenshire's estate. It had delivered every gate, weapon, and witness into the conspirators' hands. Harcourt took the supply page from Eleanor, held it over the lantern, and burned it to ash. Then he turned to the guards. "Confine Mrs. Vale in the eastern tower. Lock Ladies Beatrice and Anne in their rooms. As for his grace, keep him under protection in his study until the royal inspector arrives." Ravenshire looked up sharply. "You do not give orders concerning my movements." "I do now," Harcourt replied, lifting the document bearing the Duke's wet signature. From the black carriage, 2 men dragged out the estate steward, his face bloodied and his hands bound. Before the guards carried him away, he looked directly at Eleanor and shouted, "The marriage record still exists." Harcourt never found the chaplain's second copy. A musket stock struck his mouth. Harcourt ordered the man silenced, but it was too late. Eleanor had heard him, and so had Lady Cecily, whose sudden terror revealed that the missing marriage record threatened far more than Ravenshire's engagement. Lady Cecily's terror vanished behind a practiced expression, but not before Eleanor saw her glance toward the ruined chapel beyond the eastern woods. Harcourt followed his daughter's gaze and understood at once. "Search the old chapel," he ordered. "Every crypt, cupboard, and prayer book. Burn anything bearing the name of a military chaplain." Ravenshire stepped toward him. 2 household guards crossed their muskets before the Duke's chest. "Stand aside," Ravenshire commanded. Neither man moved. Harcourt folded the newly signed order and placed it inside his coat. "They answer to me until the investigation is concluded. I gave you authority to secure the estate, not imprison its owner. The distinction will matter greatly when you explain these weapons to the Crown." Harcourt ordered Eleanor taken to the eastern tower. Beatrice tried to follow, but Lady Cecily seized her arm. Eleanor saw Beatrice preparing to resist and shook her head. Another struggle would give Harcourt an excuse to injure her. "Remember your history lessons," Eleanor said as the guards pulled her away. "Especially King John." Beatrice's frightened face sharpened with understanding. Eleanor had taught both sisters that no authority should be trusted merely because it wore a crown or held a seal. More importantly, their lesson on King John's lost treasure had included a childish hiding game. Whenever Eleanor said his name, the girls knew to conceal anything important beneath the loose stone beside the schoolroom hearth. If Beatrice still carried the broken miniature, she would know where to place it. The guards marched Eleanor through the house. Servants watched from doorways, but quickly lowered their eyes. Harcourt's men had replaced the loyal footmen at every entrance. Doors stood open. Drawers had been emptied, and bundles of household correspondence lay scattered across the floors. He was not searching only for the chaplain's record. He meant to remove every piece of evidence that could contradict the story he planned to present at dawn. The eastern tower room had once belonged to Ravenshire's grandmother. Its windows were narrow, its fireplace cold, and its only door reinforced with iron. The guard removed Eleanor's shoes and searched her sleeves before locking her inside. She waited until his footsteps disappeared, then examined the room. Harcourt had chosen it because escape seemed impossible. That did not mean it lacked another exit. Eleanor had spent years teaching 2 restless girls inside every neglected corner of Ravenshire House. She knew the tower's rainwater entered through a cracked parapet and ran behind the northern wall. The resulting damp had loosened the wooden panel beside the wardrobe. She dragged the heavy furniture aside and pressed her fingers into the warped seam. The panel opened scarcely an inch before striking something solid. Eleanor pushed harder. A small leather case fell from the cavity. It bore the initials of the late Duchess of Ravenshire, the Duke's mother. Inside were old household receipts, several personal letters, and a packet of medical bills. Eleanor should have ignored them, but one creditor's name appeared repeatedly: Lord Harcourt. The late Duchess had borrowed heavily from him during the final years of her life. A folded agreement revealed that the debts would be forgiven if her son married Harcourt's daughter before his 35th birthday. Ravenshire had not pursued the alliance solely for political advancement. He was trying to hide his mother's insolvency and prevent Harcourt from claiming 3 villages that formed part of her private property. Yet one clause changed everything. Harcourt's claim became void if Ravenshire already had a lawful wife on the date of the agreement. That was why the chaplain's second record mattered. If the marriage was proved, Harcourt could neither force the union with Cecily nor seize the villages through the late Duchess's debt. He had therefore needed Eleanor disgraced, removed, and eventually silenced. The soldiers had been sent for her, not for Beatrice. A key scraped inside the tower door. Eleanor concealed the papers beneath her dress before Ravenshire entered. Harcourt's guard remained outside. The Duke closed the door and looked at the room as though he had never understood how cold it was. "The inspector will arrive before sunrise," he said. "Harcourt claims he can prevent charges against Beatrice and Anne if you confess that you arranged the weapons shipments." Eleanor almost laughed. "And what does he promise you?" "The sisters will be protected. The estate will remain intact, under his control, only until the scandal passes." Eleanor studied the man she had married. "You came here to ask me to confess to treason. I came to offer you a way to survive. Harcourt will arrange transportation rather than execution. Transportation to a penal colony for a crime he committed." Ravenshire's voice broke. "If I refuse, he will accuse Beatrice of assisting you." She carried the portrait. She entered the storehouse. There are soldiers prepared to testify that she attacked them. Those soldiers assaulted her. "I know. The admission came too late and too quietly. Then speak the truth publicly and lose everything my mother tried to preserve." Eleanor drew the debt agreement from beneath her dress and placed it on the table. Ravenshire stared at his mother's signature. "You knew," he whispered. "I discovered it in the wall. Harcourt has controlled you through shame, and you allowed that shame to make every decision for you. If these debts become public, my mother's name will be destroyed. So you destroyed mine instead." Ravenshire closed his eyes. He did not deny it. Eleanor showed him the clause concerning an existing marriage. "Harcourt's entire claim depends upon proving that I was never your wife. The weapons, the false ledger, and the attack were designed to make me disappear before the chaplain's record could surface." Ravenshire read the clause again. For the first time, he seemed to understand the full machinery of the trap. "Tell Harcourt you will not support his accusation," Eleanor said. "Order the guards to stand down and send riders to find the chaplain." He moved toward the door, then stopped. Outside, Harcourt's voice carried along the passage. "The younger sister has been brought to the chapel. If Ravenshire refuses the agreement, let him hear her scream." Ravenshire went white. Eleanor gripped his arm. "If you surrender now, he will never stop threatening them." The door opened. Harcourt stood outside holding a fresh document. "Mrs. Vale's confession," he said. "Sign as witness," and Anne returned safely to her room. Ravenshire looked at Eleanor, then at the paper. She saw the exact moment. Fear defeated whatever courage remained in him. He took the pen. "Do not do this," she said. His hand shook as he signed his name beneath the forged confession. Harcourt smiled and pressed Ravenshire's seal into the wax. With that single act, the Duke transformed a private conspiracy into an official accusation, carrying his own authority. Eleanor's marriage, reputation, and life now rested upon finding a record Harcourt's men were already searching the chapel to destroy. "Release Anne," Ravenshire demanded. "Certainly," Harcourt said. "As soon as Mrs. Vale tells us where the chaplain hid his second copy." Eleanor remained silent. Harcourt approached until only the table separated them. "Then we shall begin with the governess's youngest pupil. Bring Lady Anne downstairs." From the corridor came the sound of a child struggling, followed by the crash of breaking glass. A guard shouted. Then Anne's voice rang from somewhere below. "Eleanor, I found the chaplain, but they are going to kill him." Eleanor overturned the table into Harcourt's path and ran for the door. The guard reached for her. but Ravenshire struck him beneath the chin and drove him against the stone wall. Harcourt seized Eleanor's dress before she could reach the stairs. She twisted free, leaving a strip of fabric in his hand, and followed Anne's voice down the eastern passage. Ravenshire ran beside her. How could the chaplain be here? Your steward must have brought him. Before Harcourt took control of the gates, another cry echoed from the entrance hall. Eleanor reached the gallery and saw Anne standing on the floor below, with a bloodied elderly man supporting himself upon her shoulder. His clerical collar hung torn at his throat. 2 soldiers blocked the main doors, while Lady Beatrice held a fireplace poker between them and her sister. "Let them pass!" Ravenshire shouted from the gallery. The soldiers glanced toward Harcourt, not the Duke. That single movement revealed how completely Ravenshire had surrendered his authority. Harcourt descended the stairs without haste. Reverend Whitcomb is wanted for falsifying military records and performing an unlawful marriage while intoxicated. The old chaplain raised his bruised face. "I was sober when I married them, and I remained sober when your men tried to force me to deny it." He reached inside his coat, but a soldier rushed forward and knocked him to the floor. Several folded pages scattered across the marble. Harcourt snatched the nearest one and held it to a candle. Eleanor lunged, but Mowbray appeared from behind a column and caught her around the waist. The captain's face was swollen from Ravenshire's blows, and revenge burned through his earlier confidence. "You should have taken the carriage," he hissed. Flames consumed the first page. Beatrice drove the poker into Mowbray's injured shin. His grip loosened, allowing Eleanor to wrench free. She swept the remaining papers from the floor, but Harcourt stamped upon her hand and took them one by one. Most were parish extracts and letters from soldiers whose marriages Whitcomb had witnessed. The final sheet carried Eleanor's name beside Ravenshire's. Harcourt lowered it toward the candle. Ravenshire seized his wrist. "Enough. Release me unless you wish to watch Anne stand trial beside your wife. You promised my sisters would be safe, and you promised to obey the terms of our alliance. Yet here you are assisting an accused traitor." Ravenshire tightened his grip until the candle fell. It struck the carpet, and a footman smothered it beneath his coat. In the confusion, Eleanor took the marriage record from Harcourt's hand and passed it behind her to Beatrice. "King John," she whispered. Beatrice concealed the folded paper beneath her sleeve and slipped toward the servants' corridor with Anne. Harcourt saw only Eleanor's empty hand. "Search her." Mowbray seized Eleanor again, but Reverend Whitcomb dragged himself upright and stood between them. "You may search every pocket in this house. The page you seek will still expose you." Harcourt struck him across the face. Whitcomb collapsed and did not rise. Eleanor fell beside him. His pulse was weak, and blood ran from a wound behind his ear. "Send for a physician. No one enters or leaves until the royal inspector arrives," Harcourt said. "He will die. Then he will be spared the humiliation of prosecution." Ravenshire stared at Harcourt, as if the man had finally become visible to him. "You used my mother's debts to force this engagement. You filled my storehouse with weapons and threatened my sisters. I offered you a dignified solution to your family's insolvency. You were the one who signed every authority without reading it." Harcourt turned so the servants and guards could hear. "You were also the one who denied your wife, allowed her records to be seized, and placed your household under my command. Do not mistake your regret for innocence." Eleanor hated Harcourt, but the accusation was true. Ravenshire had been manipulated because he repeatedly chose pride and secrecy over investigation. Now his seal protected the conspirators. His guards answered to Harcourt, and his signed testimony made Eleanor the official architect of the crime. Outside, carriage wheels approached across the gravel. Harcourt smiled. "The royal inspector is early." A black coach stopped before the main steps. 2 magistrates entered with Colonel Pembroke, a severe man Eleanor recognized from Ravenshire's military correspondence. Harcourt welcomed them and immediately presented the false ledger, the forged confession, and the authority transferring command of the estate guards to him. He spoke smoothly, arranging every truth around a lie. Weapons had been found. Eleanor had maintained the supply accounts. Ravenshire had signed her confession. Reverend Whitcomb had carried suspicious documents into the house. Colonel Pembroke examined the Duke's signature. "You witnessed this confession freely?" Ravenshire looked at Eleanor. Harcourt's men stood beside Beatrice and Anne, hands resting upon their weapons. Ravenshire's fear returned, but this time it did not silence him. No, Harcourt threatened my younger sister. A murmur passed through the servants. Harcourt remained calm. A desperate claim from a man who has discovered treason beneath his own roof. Ravenshire removed the military commission from his coat, the appointment for which he had sacrificed Eleanor's name, and tore it in half. Then let the crown strip me of every honour. I will not purchase them with another lie. It was the first costly truth he had spoken, but it came after his decisions had made truth almost powerless. Colonel Pembroke ordered both Ravenshire and Harcourt detained until the evidence could be examined. Yet when the magistrates moved toward Harcourt, the household guards raised their muskets. "These men serve under lawful authority granted by the Duke," Harcourt said. "The property is now under my protection." A shot exploded near the front doors. One magistrate fell, blood spreading across his shoulder. Panic tore through the hall. Servants screamed and scattered as Mowbray's soldiers barred every exit. Harcourt pointed toward Eleanor. She attempted to murder an officer of the crown. "Arrest her. The shot came from the gallery," Beatrice shouted. No one listened. Mowbray dragged Eleanor away, while other soldiers forced Ravenshire and Colonel Pembroke to their knees. Harcourt had planned to frame the Duke for smuggling. Now he was seizing the estate openly before royal authority could expose him. The weapons in the northern storehouse were distributed among his men, and every gate was locked. Without the supply records, no easy order from Ravenshire could reverse what his signature had enabled. Eleanor was taken to the wine cellar with the Duke, his sisters, Colonel Pembroke, and the wounded magistrate. Reverend Whitcomb was left unconscious in the hall. The heavy door closed, and a key turned outside. Colonel Pembroke pressed a cloth against the magistrate's wound. "Harcourt's men will carry those weapons to London tonight. They will attack the ministry convoy and leave evidence identifying Ravenshire as their supplier. By morning, the Crown will believe this estate began an insurrection." Ravenshire sank against the wall. His title, his lands, and perhaps his life would be destroyed by the power he had handed Harcourt. Eleanor refused to comfort him. She examined the cellar instead, tracing the ventilation shaft toward the old drainage tunnel that opened beyond the southern wall. Anne touched her sleeve. "Beatrice hid the marriage record where you taught us, but I kept something else." From inside her stocking, the child withdrew the cracked miniature bearing Eleanor's face and the red cross. When Eleanor pried away its broken glass, she found a thin piece of paper concealed behind the portrait. It contained a list of 6 names, a London route, and a time, 2 o'clock in the morning. Beneath them appeared a single instruction in Harcourt's hand: kill every surviving witness at Ravenshire before departure. Eleanor looked at the people trapped around her. The drainage tunnel might allow only one person to escape before Harcourt's guards discovered it, and midnight was less than 20 minutes away. Eleanor folded the paper and looked toward the narrow ventilation shaft above the wine racks. "Anne is the smallest. She can fit through." Ravenshire shook his head immediately. "I will not send a child into a drainage tunnel while armed men control the grounds. Then all of us remain here until Harcourt kills every witness. There must be another way." "There was another way. You signed it away." His face tightened, but he did not argue. Eleanor knelt before Anne. "The shaft leads to the old wash house beyond the southern wall. Do you remember where Mrs. Finch keeps the laundry cart?" Anne nodded, though her lips trembled. "Take the cart road to Willow Cottage. Give this list to Mr. Hale and tell him to ring the parish bell 3 times. He must send riders to the Southern Bridge and the London Road." Mr. Hale was a tenant farmer whom Eleanor had helped after Harcourt's agents attempted to seize his winter grain for unpaid rent that did not exist. He trusted her because she had once produced the original receipts that saved his family from eviction. More importantly, he commanded the loyalty of half the village. "What if the soldiers see me?" Anne asked. Eleanor removed the plain black glove concealing her wedding ring and placed it in the girl's hand. "Show this to Mrs. Finch. She will hide you among the linens." Anne curled her fingers around the glove. Ravenshire stared at the uncovered ring. It was the thin gold band he had placed on Eleanor's finger in Portugal, still marked where a piece of falling timber had struck it during the hospital fire. She had concealed it after he denied their marriage, not because she accepted his lie, but because openly wearing it would have allowed Harcourt to accuse her of impersonating a duchess. Ravenshire crouched beside his sister. "I should go." "You cannot fit," Anne whispered. "And Eleanor says you make too much noise when you try to be clever." Beatrice almost laughed despite the danger. Eleanor helped Anne climb onto a barrel and loosened the iron grate with a corkscrew taken from the rack. The child crawled into the shaft, pausing only once to look back. "I will bring help." "You already have," Eleanor said. "Now be quiet and brave." They replaced the grate after she disappeared. Colonel Pembroke unfolded the hidden note beneath the faint cellar light. "These 6 names belong to officers assigned to the ministry convoy. If Harcourt knows their route, someone in London is assisting him." Eleanor pointed to tiny punctures beside 3 names. This paper was pinned beneath another sheet when the instruction was written. The pressure marks may contain whatever was written above it. Ravenshire looked at her. "Can you recover them?" "Not in this light." Beatrice moved toward the bottles. "The schoolroom exercises. You taught us to shade paper over old writing. That works when the sheet beneath is soft enough to retain an impression." Eleanor placed the note against a wooden crate and rubbed a fragment of candle soot lightly across it. Pale lines appeared beneath the black dust. The first words were incomplete, but a date and location emerged. Carlton House, August 21st. Colonel Pembroke drew a sharp breath. "There is a private council meeting there tomorrow. The convoy attack is a diversion. Harcourt intends to use Ravenshire's supposed rebellion to force the council into emergency measures that would grant military contracts and expanded authority to his allies," Ravenshire said. "He spoke of them for months." Eleanor studied the remaining impressions. "There is another name here." The letters were faint, but the distinctive hooked capital became clear. Cecily Harcourt. Lady Cecily had prepared the hidden instruction. She was not merely an obedient daughter trapped inside her father's plot. She had copied Eleanor's handwriting, planted the false ledger, and selected the witnesses marked for death. Beatrice's face hardened. "She searched the schoolroom while we were at breakfast. She knew exactly where Eleanor kept the accounts." Ravenshire closed his eyes. "I gave her permission to enter every room belonging to the future Duchess. That authority had allowed Cecily to study Eleanor's correspondence, remove the genuine records, and place the forged book inside the cabinet." The evidence chain began with Ravenshire's rejection of his wife and continued through every privilege he had granted her replacement. A faint scraping came from beyond the cellar door. Everyone fell silent. The key turned. Lady Cecily entered alone, carrying a lantern and a basket of food. Her crimson cloak had been replaced by a dark travelling dress, but one cuff bore fresh blue ink. "My father intends to kill you before leaving," she said. "I can open the southern door and give you horses, but Eleanor must surrender the marriage record." "Why?" Ravenshire asked. "Without that record, our marriage remains possible. Once we are married, I can persuade father to spare Beatrice and Anne. You forged Eleanor's accounts." Cecily's gaze moved to the soot-darkened note in Colonel Pembroke's hands. She understood too late what they had recovered. "My father forced me." "The pressure marks carry your name," Eleanor said. "You wrote the execution order." Cecily placed the basket on the floor. "I wrote what he dictated and copied my hand. You had everything I was promised. His loyalty, his name, this house." Eleanor looked at Ravenshire. "I possessed none of those things once he decided you were more useful." Cecily's composure cracked. "Then you understand why I cannot leave without them." She reached beneath the folded cloth in the basket and drew a small pistol. Ravenshire stepped before Eleanor. "If you fire, the guards will come. That is precisely what I want." Cecily aimed the weapon at her own shoulder and pulled the trigger. The explosion filled the cellar. She fell against the wall, screaming as blood spread across her dress. Before Eleanor could reach her, Cecily threw the pistol at Eleanor's feet. The cellar door opened, and 4 guards rushed inside. Cecily pointed at Eleanor with a shaking hand. "She shot me. She said she would kill every Harcourt before dawn." The guards seized Eleanor, while Mowbray lifted the smoking pistol. Her fingerprints were not a concept the magistrates could use, and every visible circumstance favoured Cecily's lie. Yet the shot had torn away part of Cecily's cuff, exposing several reversed blue letters pressed against her wrist. Eleanor recognized them as transfers from the forged ledger's still wet ink. "Do not wipe her arm," Eleanor called as the guards dragged her away. "The proof is on her skin." Mowbray glanced at the blue marks and immediately pulled Cecily's sleeve down. That reaction told Colonel Pembroke exactly where to look, but he remained locked in the cellar while Eleanor was taken toward the courtyard. Harcourt stood beside a line of loaded wagons preparing to leave for London. "The Royal Inspector witnessed your attack upon my daughter," he said. By dawn, no court in England will question your guilt. Eleanor heard the distant parish bell ring once, then twice, then a third time. Anne had reached Willow Cottage. Across the dark fields, other bells began answering. Harcourt's men turned toward the sound as lanterns appeared along the southern road. First 10, then 20, then more than Eleanor could count. The tenants of Ravenshire were coming, but Mowbray placed a pistol against Eleanor's back and forced her onto the first weapons wagon. "Let them follow," Harcourt said. "By the time they reach London, the governess will have led an armed rebellion in her husband's name." The wagon lurched toward the western gate, with Eleanor bound between two crates of pistols. Mowbray sat opposite her, keeping his weapon trained upon her chest, while Harcourt and Cecily followed in the black carriage. Behind them, mounted soldiers guarded 5 wagons, loaded with enough weapons to transform Harcourt's conspiracy into the appearance of an uprising. Lanterns continued gathering across the southern fields as Ravenshire's tenants answered the parish bells, but none dared fire, while Eleanor remained exposed. The first wagon reached the gate and stopped. Dozens of villagers blocked the road with farm carts, timber, and overturned grain barrels. Mr. Hale stood at their centre, holding Anne upon his horse. "Release Mrs. Vale and the Duke's family," he called. Mowbray pressed the pistol beneath Eleanor's chin. "Clear the road, or she dies first." Eleanor met Mr. Hale's eyes and shook her head. If the tenants attacked, Harcourt would obtain exactly what he needed: armed villagers resisting royal uniforms beneath Ravenshire's name. Harcourt stepped from his carriage, carrying the Duke's signed accusation. "This woman has confessed to treason. Anyone assisting her will be treated as a rebel." Confusion moved through the crowd. The villagers trusted Eleanor, but the paper bore Ravenshire's genuine seal. Harcourt had turned the Duke's authority into a weapon more dangerous than the pistols hidden in the wagons. Ravenshire appeared above the gatehouse with Colonel Pembroke, Beatrice, and the wounded magistrate. They had escaped the cellar through the passage Anne opened from the wash-house, but Harcourt's soldiers still controlled the courtyard below. "That confession is false," Ravenshire shouted. "I signed it after Lord Harcourt threatened my sister." Harcourt raised the document. "A duke now claims his own signature means nothing. Shall England's courts accept every nobleman who regrets the orders he gave?" Ravenshire looked toward Eleanor. There was no explanation that could erase what he had done. Only a truth costly enough to prevent his lie from harming anyone else. "The signature is mine," he said, so every tenant and soldier could hear. "So is the seal. I denied Eleanor as my lawful wife because I wanted Harcourt's alliance. I allowed him into this estate, gave his daughter access to my wife's rooms, and transferred my guards to his command. When Eleanor warned me, I chose ambition over her word. Every authority Harcourt used tonight was authority I gave him." The confession stripped away the dignity he had tried to preserve. Servants, tenants, magistrates, and soldiers now knew their duke had publicly sacrificed his wife and concealed his marriage for advantage. Colonel Pembroke removed the royal insignia from Ravenshire's coat. "Until the Crown completes its inquiry, you are relieved of military office and placed under my authority." Ravenshire handed over the insignia without protest. "I accept it." Harcourt's expression hardened. Ravenshire's truth could not prove Eleanor innocent, but it destroyed the clean narrative of a loyal nobleman deceived by a treacherous governess. Mowbray struck Eleanor across the mouth. "Clear the road." Mr. Hale began moving the carts aside. Eleanor understood his choice. Saving her life now might allow Harcourt to escape, yet keeping the villagers peaceful preserved them as credible witnesses rather than convenient rebels. The procession passed through the gate. Anne slipped from Hale's horse and ran toward the wagon, but Beatrice caught her before the soldiers could seize her. "Trust Eleanor," Beatrice whispered. Eleanor wished she possessed a plan worthy of that trust. Harcourt had burned the supply page, seized the false ledger, and controlled the only weapons tied to the scheme. The genuine marriage record remained hidden beneath the schoolroom hearth, but it proved only her position as Ravenshire's wife, not who arranged the smuggling. Colonel Pembroke had seen the pressure marks bearing Cecily's name, yet Mowbray would destroy the note before any court examined it. Even the ink upon Cecily's skin could be washed away before dawn. The wagons followed the northern road toward London. After several miles, Harcourt ordered a halt beside an abandoned toll house. His men forced Colonel Pembroke, Ravenshire, and the sisters from a second wagon. The tenants had been prevented from following beyond the estate boundary. Harcourt no longer needed restraint. The inspector and the Duke will die during an escape attempt, he told Mowbray. The sisters will be found beside the weapons. Eleanor will survive long enough to confess publicly, then hang before she can withdraw it. Cecily stepped down from the carriage, her wounded shoulder bandaged and her stained cuff replaced. What about the magistrate? He will die of his injury before reaching London. Mowbray took the soot-darkened note from Colonel Pembroke's coat and dropped it into a roadside brazier. The paper curled, blackened, and disappeared. Their most fragile proof was gone. Harcourt smiled at Eleanor. Your accounts have been destroyed. Your chaplain will be dead before morning, and my daughter's ledger bears your hand. What remains? Eleanor looked toward the brazier, but something else caught her attention. The firelight reflected from the broken miniature still hanging around Anne's neck. She remembered Mowbray crushing its glass, the hidden execution list, and the words he had murmured after waking. Wrong, sister. At first, Eleanor had believed he meant the soldiers had seized Beatrice when their intended target was Eleanor. Now she understood the contradiction. If Eleanor had always been the true target, there was no wrong sister. The phrase referred to Beatrice and Anne. Harcourt's men had been ordered to seize one specific sister, but they had taken the other during the breakfast attack. Why would the conspiracy need Anne rather than Beatrice? Eleanor's gaze moved to the miniature. Anne had said she removed the hidden paper from behind Eleanor's portrait, but the silver case itself was older than the painting. Along its rim were tiny initials, almost concealed beneath tarnish. M.R. They belonged to the late Duchess Margaret Ravenshire. The miniature had once been hers. Eleanor opened the clasp and felt an unusual weight beneath the velvet backing. She pulled away the fabric and found a second compartment containing a narrow brass token engraved with Harcourt's crest and a number. Colonel Pembroke recognized it instantly. A private deposit marker. Harcourt's bank keeps numbered deed boxes in London. Harcourt's face lost all color. His men had carried the miniature because its token opened the box containing the original debt agreements, shipping contracts and correspondence connecting him to the weapons. The late Duchess must have hidden it before her death. Anne, not Beatrice, had unknowingly found the miniature in her mother's old rooms, which made her the sister Harcourt intended to seize. Eleanor closed her fingers around the token. The destroyed note no longer mattered. Their decisive evidence was waiting inside a London bank, and Harcourt had just revealed his fear of it before a royal inspector, a magistrate, and the Duke. She tossed the token into the brazier. Harcourt lunged forward instinctively, exposing its value to every witness. But the brass did not burn. It slipped through the coals and fell beneath the iron grate. Eleanor smiled for the first time that night. Now we shall discover how many crimes you are willing to confess while trying to retrieve it. Harcourt dropped to one knee beside the brazier, then caught himself before reaching into the flames. That hesitation condemned him more effectively than panic would have done. Colonel Pembroke had seen the crest and number. So had the wounded magistrate, Ravenshire, and both sisters. Harcourt could no longer dismiss the token as meaningless, yet retrieving it would confirm that he recognized its purpose. A cheap gaming marker, he said. Then leave it there, Eleanor replied. Mowbray kicked the brazier over. Burning coals scattered across the road, and the brass token rolled into the grass. 3 men moved toward it at once. Anne reached it first. She closed her hand around the hot metal and ran behind Colonel Pembroke. Mowbray raised his pistol, but Beatrice stepped into his path. Shoot a 12-year-old in front of a royal officer, she said. Let us see how faithfully your men follow you after that. The soldiers looked at one another. Harcourt's plan had depended upon secrecy, forged authority, and witnesses who could be silenced separately. Now every order he gave revealed more of the crime. Distant hoofbeats sounded from the southern road. The tenants had found another route around the blocked boundary. With them rode the estate constable and nearly 20 local militia volunteers summoned by the parish bells. Harcourt ordered his soldiers to form a defensive line, but Mowbray's men had begun to understand that they were about to be blamed for the entire conspiracy. You promised us pardons, one soldier said. And commissions, said another. Those promises are in the bank box. Are they not? Eleanor asked. Harcourt turned upon her. Be silent. Captain Mowbray should consider whether your correspondence names him as a partner or describes him as an expendable smuggler. Mowbray's pistol shifted from Beatrice toward Harcourt. What is inside the box? Nothing that concerns you. That is not an answer. Ravenshire moved beside Eleanor. Your men are listening, Harcourt. Tell them why you are so afraid of a gaming marker. Harcourt backed toward his carriage. Lady Cecily watched him with growing horror. She had obeyed her father because she believed he could control the outcome. Now his retreat told her that he had prepared a future in which she, too, might carry the blame. Eleanor turned to Cecily. The false ledger bears your copied writing. The execution list was written in your hand. If the bank box contains your father's instructions, he will claim you acted from jealousy, without his knowledge. He would never do that. He allowed you to shoot yourself so I could be accused. Did he tell you what would happen if the wound turned mortal? Cecily looked at the carriage, then at her father. What did you write about me? Do not listen to her. What did you put in the box? Harcourt seized Cecily's uninjured arm and tried to force her into the carriage. She resisted. Mowbray ordered him to release her, and the soldiers' line broke apart as half the men turned toward their commander, while the others watched the approaching militia. Eleanor used the distraction to move Anne behind the magistrate's wagon. Keep the token hidden until Colonel Pembroke asks for it. Do not give it to Ravenshire, Beatrice, or me. Anne nodded solemnly. Establishing clear possession mattered. If the token passed through several hands, Harcourt could later claim it had been altered or exchanged. Colonel Pembroke announced that he had witnessed Anne recover it from beneath the brazier and would accompany her directly to the bank. The magistrate recorded the statement on the blank reverse of Harcourt's forged confession, then asked Ravenshire and the constable to sign as witnesses. Harcourt heard the scratching pen and understood that the token now had a documented chain of custody. He drew a small pistol from inside his coat. Ravenshire saw it first and pushed Eleanor down as Harcourt fired. The ball tore through the Duke's upper arm. Mowbray tackled Harcourt before he could shoot again, and the militia rushed forward. A brief struggle followed. Harcourt's soldiers surrendered when Colonel Pembroke promised that those who laid down their weapons would be questioned individually rather than condemned together. Lady Cecily attempted to flee in the black carriage, but Beatrice cut the lead horse free with Mowbray's discarded sword. By 2 o'clock in the morning, Harcourt, Cecily, and Mowbray were secured in separate wagons. The weapons convoy was redirected toward London under militia guard, with each crate sealed and numbered by the magistrate. Eleanor insisted that the villagers return to Ravenshire rather than enter the city armed. Harcourt would not be allowed to transform loyal tenants into the rebellion he had invented. At dawn, Colonel Pembroke took Anne, Eleanor, Ravenshire, the magistrate and the 3 prisoners to Harcourt's private bank. Word of the weapons seizure had already reached the Home Office. 2 government clerks, a second magistrate, and representatives of the bank assembled in the high-ceilinged records chamber. The venue lacked the splendor of a ballroom or court, but every statement made there would enter legal record. Harcourt attacked first. He claimed Eleanor had stolen the deposit token from Lady Cecily, manipulated a frightened child, and organized armed tenants to seize property belonging to a political rival. Cecily supported him, insisting the blue ink found upon her wrist came from writing invitations. Mowbray claimed the weapons had been purchased under Eleanor's instructions. The false ledger was placed upon the central table. Mrs. Vale maintained the estate supplies, Harcourt said. Her handwriting and signature appear beside every payment. The Duke himself witnessed her confession. Eleanor waited until he finished. The ledger was supposedly found inside my locked cabinet. Lady Cecily, who opened it. Cecily hesitated. I did. With what key? A servant provided one. Name the servant. Cecily could not. Eleanor then asked when the ledger had been discovered. Cecily gave the hour as 11:30. Ravenshire testified that at that time the cabinet stood open and empty because he had already found Eleanor there. Next, Eleanor placed genuine household bills beside the false ledger. Her figures were compressed, her sevens crossed, and her totals calculated in the margins. The forged entries used the graceful script of her personal letters. A bank clerk confirmed that several pages smelled of fresh binding glue. Colonel Pembroke described the blue reversed letters visible upon Cecily's wrist before Mowbray covered them. The wounded magistrate testified that Harcourt's soldiers fired from the gallery after arriving under authority Ravenshire had signed. Ravenshire then named every choice he had made, denying his marriage, dismissing Eleanor's warnings, granting Cecily access to her rooms, transferring control of the guards, and signing the false confession. He authenticated his own failures without claiming they proved Eleanor's innocence. That proof belonged to her. Eleanor turned to Mowbray. You said my accounts directed the weapons shipments. What name did I use for the 4 concealed barrels delivered to the northern storehouse? French brandy. The false ledger calls them Spanish wine. Mowbray looked toward Harcourt before realizing the trap. Only someone who had seen the genuine delivery page could know the barrels were recorded as brandy. Harcourt had burned that page, and Eleanor had never been permitted to speak privately with Mowbray after its discovery. His knowledge came from participating in the shipment. Eleanor asked one final question. Who ordered you to seize Lady Anne? No one ordered me to seize the child. Then how did you know which sister I meant? Silence filled the chamber. Mowbray had exposed knowledge contained only in the hidden instructions. The magistrate ordered Anne to produce the token. Colonel Pembroke verified its number against the statement written beside the roadside brazier. The bank manager examined the crest, opened the register, and announced that the corresponding deed box had been deposited 6 months earlier under Lord Harcourt's name. Harcourt claimed the contents were private and unrelated. The magistrate ordered the box brought forward. 4 clerks carried it into the chamber and placed it before them. The manager inserted the token, turned it once, and lifted the lid. On top lay a sealed letter addressed to Captain Mowbray, beside shipping contracts carrying Harcourt's signature and a document written entirely in Lady Cecily's hand. Eleanor recognized the military seal upon the final envelope. Colonel Pembroke broke it, unfolded the page, and stared at the name written beneath Harcourt's instructions. It belonged to a man seated on the Royal Council, a man with the power to turn the entire conspiracy into an act of government unless the signature could be authenticated before noon. Colonel Pembroke read the name aloud. Lord Wexford. Harcourt's expression changed, not with fear, but relief. Lord Wexford was a senior member of the Royal Council and the official responsible for reviewing military appointments. If the signature were accepted as genuine, Harcourt could claim the weapons operation had been secretly authorized by the Crown. Every crime committed at Ravenshire might then be disguised as an operation against political radicals. The bank chamber divided at once. One government clerk demanded that the documents be sealed until Lord Wexford could examine them personally. The second magistrate warned that accusing a council member without indisputable proof could destroy everyone present. Harcourt leaned back in his chair. You see, Mrs. Vale, you mistook matters of state for a household conspiracy. Eleanor did not answer. She examined the supposed authorization beside 3 genuine letters from the deed box. The handwriting appeared consistent. The signature matched. Even the paper carried the government watermark. Yet Harcourt's plan had already revealed one fatal habit. He copied what looked important without understanding how it had been created. Eleanor turned the authorization toward the window. This paper was manufactured for the government offices, but the writing did not originate there. She pointed to a faint line running across the lower corner. It was folded before Lord Wexford supposedly signed it. Official authorizations are written, sanded and sealed before being folded for delivery. Colonel Pembroke inspected the crease. Ink had gathered inside it, proving the page was already folded when someone wrote the name. A copied signature, he said. Eleanor placed the document beside the false household ledger. Lady Cecily copied my letters because she believed personal handwriting and accounting figures were interchangeable. She made the same error here. Cecily's composure finally broke. I only copied what Father gave me. Harcourt turned sharply toward her. Say nothing. He told me Lord Wexford had approved everything. He gave me the letters and ordered me to practice the signature. You wrote the authorization willingly, Harcourt said. You prepared the execution list and planted the ledger. Your jealousy toward Eleanor is known to everyone. Eleanor's warning had proved true. Harcourt was sacrificing his daughter before the evidence had even been fully examined. Cecily stared at him, then began to speak. She described how Harcourt had used the late Duchess's debts to pressure Ravenshire into an alliance, how he obtained access to the Duke's seal through documents Ravenshire signed without reading, and how French pistols were shipped under false wine orders. Lady Cecily had copied Eleanor's handwriting, planted the ledger, and marked the witnesses who might expose them. Harcourt planned to stage an attack upon the ministry convoy, blame the weapons on Ravenshire, and use the resulting emergency to secure government contracts through Lord Wexford's forged approval. "And the marriage record?" the magistrate asked. Cecily lowered her eyes. Father knew his debt claim would fail if Eleanor's marriage predated the alliance agreement. He ordered Mowbray to seize Anne because she had found the late Duchess's miniature. We believed the deposit token was inside it. Reverend Whitcomb's second marriage record was brought from Ravenshire later that morning under guard. Beatrice had hidden it beneath the schoolroom hearth, exactly as Eleanor instructed. The chaplain survived his injuries and gave sworn testimony, confirming that Eleanor and Ravenshire had married lawfully in Portugal. The record restored Eleanor's title, but she felt no triumph in being called Duchess by the same people who had watched her live as a servant. Her vindication rested not upon the title, but upon the full removal of the accusations that had threatened her life. The magistrates compared the shipping contracts, bank correspondence, and weapons seals. Mowbray's letter promised him a regiment after the convoy attack and instructed him to kill the surviving witnesses before leaving Ravenshire. Confronted with Harcourt's plan to abandon him, Mowbray identified the soldiers, carriers, and bribed guards involved. Harcourt was arrested for conspiracy, illegal arms trafficking, attempted murder, forgery, and coercion. His property was placed under legal restraint pending trial. Mowbray and the participating soldiers were transferred to military custody, with lesser consideration reserved for those who had surrendered and testified. Cecily was charged for the forged evidence, execution order, and false accusation against Eleanor. Her wounded shoulder spared her no responsibility, though her testimony against Harcourt was entered in mitigation. Lord Wexford was publicly cleared when samples from his private correspondence proved that the signature was copied from a letter written 3 years earlier. Ravenshire faced separate consequences. His military commission was permanently withdrawn. The Crown censured him for surrendering control of his estate and signing an accusation without investigation. More painfully, Beatrice and Anne refused to remain under his sole guardianship until he restored Eleanor's legal authority and guaranteed their independence from any future political marriage. He agreed without protest. Before the magistrates, tenants, and household servants assembled at Ravenshire, the Duke corrected every public lie he had told. "Eleanor is my lawful wife. She did not deceive me, steal from me, or arrange the weapons found here. I denied our marriage because I feared scandal, desired advancement, and lacked the courage to expose my mother's debts. When evidence contradicted Harcourt, I chose the explanation that protected my ambition. My wife saved my sisters and my estate after I had denied her the protection of my name." He returned Eleanor's personal correspondence, restored her rooms, and transferred the late Duchess's 3 unentailed villages into a trust administered for Eleanor's security and the tenants' welfare. He also signed a deed of separate maintenance, giving her an independent residence and income, whether she remained his wife in practice or only in law. "I will not ask you to forgive me," he told her privately. His wounded arm rested in a sling, but Eleanor felt no impulse to comfort him. "Good. An apology offered as a path back into my life would merely be another demand. Then tell me what remains to be done. Learn to protect the truth when it costs you something, not only after every easier choice has failed." Eleanor chose to live at Willow House, near the tenants who had answered the bells. Beatrice and Anne divided their time between her home and Ravenshire, under terms they helped establish. The Duke visited only by invitation. For a year, he repaired cottages, returned improperly, collected rents, and testified at every proceeding against Harcourt, without asking Eleanor to conceal his own failures. She watched his conduct, but promised him nothing. On the first anniversary of the breakfast room attack, Beatrice and Anne invited both of them to Willow House. Ravenshire entered the kitchen and found Eleanor holding a new black iron skillet. A shadow of alarm crossed his face. Anne burst into laughter. "This one is for cooking, brother." Eleanor placed the skillet in his hands. "Then you may begin by making breakfast." Once, she had stood alone with a broken pan, while his authority threatened to destroy her. Now he stood in her house, awaiting her permission, while she decided whether he had earned a place at her table. Eleanor opened the cupboard, set out 4 plates instead of 3, and pointed toward the hearth. It was not forgiveness. It was one conditional morning, chosen freely by her.